Let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to Boxing Unwrapped.
Hello, welcome to this week's Boxing Unwrapped, the podcast that answers questions that you never asked. I'm Ryan.
I'm Andrew.
And this week, guys, we've got a great episode for you. Just a little reminder to like, share, subscribe. I set you all a little task last week to share the episode on the Facebook post, and you didn't disappoint. Like predicted, none of you did it, so I would appreciate if you would do it for this episode.
It's a tightrope, is it, Ryan? It's a tightrope about, badgering our listenership. Prompting action without badgering. It's tough.
It's tough days. But Andy, do you want to tell the good people what we've got in store for them this week?
I liked your new spin there, by the way. I like the new little style, a little finesse in your introduction there. A little bit.
It's getting slick, slick.
You've got to look for the marginal gains all the time, do you? Right?
You do.
And that, of course, segues us nicely into the main topic of the episode, which is what the F are marginal gains, and more specifically, how do they apply to sport, and even more specifically, how do they apply to boxing? We, of course, will have more of our regular features. What the F are the results from last week? A few different things to go over, including an upset or two. What the F are the fights this weekend, and I don't think anyone is going to be overly excited, possibly. Pretty thin on the ground. It's a bit of a tumbleweed week. What the F went wrong last week? Just a couple of cheeky ones to go over there. A fairly substantial chunk of random news, and of course, everyone's favourite feature: what grinds my gears.
What an episode! Jam-packed.
What an episode! What an episode!
So let's jump into our main topic of the day. What the F are marginal gains?
What are marginal gains? It's interesting, and I think it's something that has entered the kind of language lexicon in recent years, hasn't it? From a few years ago, and it was popularised certainly in the UK around British cycling and its kind of success, but it's worth kind of going back to the start and saying what it is and where did it come from. And the research I found, the earliest example was to do with Wilhelm Steinitz, a chess champion in the late 19th century.
Wow.
Did you come across this?
No, I did not.
So apparently, in terms of, he did this sort of specific approach regarding study and looking to improve around this very marginal incremental improvements, and within this field of chess, this was the first kind of detailed application of marginal gains in competition around 1886. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where it stems from. I think it's probably worth saying just exactly the sort of kind of definition. So, but after that, but before it was kind of adopted as that phrase in sport, it was linked to the concept of kaizen, which is a Japanese concept due to used in kind of originally in manufacturing and technology industries.
Yeah,
and the concept of continuous improvement.
Yeah, this is where I kind of picked it up from, and the kind of major use by Toyota in the use of kaizen as a kind of philosophy for their business. That permeates, which is really interesting. Actually, it permeates all the way through from the actual production, but also the management of people to make sure their workforce is as productive as possible. Not just how much downtime do they have, but also are they happy coming to work? Are they do they have any problems when they come in? Are they comfortable when they sit down? Shit like that. If you can improve and make things better for your workforce, they will in fact be more productive and your company will be better.
Yeah, I did actually, when I, one of my kind of first jobs after uni, I worked in a role kind of actually to do with implementation of this kind of approach in the organization I worked in. It was actually one that had Japanese origins, so it kind of makes sense. But so it's continuous improvement through the aggregation of marginal gains is that concept, and so that's what they're saying. It's this idea around continuous improvement, and saying, like you were talking about then, this completely holistic approach to it, to say, let's look at everything within the environment in terms of people, motivation, processes, quality, everything, and go, how do we look at each and every one of those to try and improve everywhere exactly how much we can, but we look at every single detail and say, where is there an opportunity to make an improvement regardless of how small it is. And it's the cumulative effect of all those marginal gains, of all those improvements, that's this got the concept of marginal gains.
Its most famous implementation in sport, where it's kind of grown in knowledge, is Dave Brailsford, when he became the head of British Cycling in 2002. And he stepped into a role where they had like pretty much no record of success at all. And then, 2008, the Beijing Olympics, they won 7 out of 10 gold medals available in track cycling. Which actually, if you think, between 2002 and 2008, to make that jump is huge. But his background is interesting because although he was a former professional cyclist, he has an MBA. So he basically became quite fascinated with the idea of Kaizen and process improvement techniques. So when he stepped into the role, he thought that it was thinking the smaller things, and the aggregation of marginal gains is what it is that makes the difference. And this is where I think people get it wrong, because they think about marginal gains and they think, oh, well, we just need to do like 1% better in order to be better. But it's actually that aggregation of finding like 1% improvements over the whole process that then leads you to have the aggregation of marginal gains, which makes you way better.
Yeah, it's about saying, but there's a couple of things to point out in terms of what he was doing. I think one of the things that people have focused on is that they looked at things that I think seem in essence like a little bit kind of quirky, a little bit kind of left field. Like there was a lot of chat about it's the kind of soundbite bits that got the attention because they make a good quote. The idea that they took their own pillows for all the cyclists on like the Tour de France stages, so they wouldn't sleep with the pillows of the hotel. They would sleep with their own pillows because they were used to them, etc. And things like there was something about like pineapple juice because it was like ever so slightly better for rehydration or something like that. Yeah. But the thing is that they're not going in to like a sport where it's cavemen. they're not, the other guys aren't riding about in like the Flintstones. They've not got like stone wheels or anything. It's not being pedaled by a fucking dinosaur. Do you know what I mean? It's like all of the teams have analysis. They're all doing analysis and they're all building upon like a heritage of knowledge. So it's the idea about you look at those things in depth and you see what are the other things that we can consider as well, which if we do a whole bunch of them in aggregation might give us this tiny edge. I mean, 1% in professional sport is an enormous gain to try and get. Do you know? So it's like, it's just about saying, are there enough tiny marginal things that we can consider that we can test what the impact of them will be, and if we get enough of those things on top of all the kind of bread and butter analysis that we have to do, does that then put us in a position where we have an advantage over the other teams, however small it might be? Yeah. And that was the way they did it.
Like there were some interesting kind of quirks that came up during the course of my research that he looked at. We've all heard about the taking the pillows and stuff like that, but there are other things that they implemented which were makes sense, right? But also incredibly interesting. So they hired a surgeon to teach athletes about proper hand washing to avoid illnesses during competition. And during the Olympics, they did not shake hands with anyone.
Which sounds crazy, but like I always think that when you see people, especially people in sportsmen or politicians, they must do their chances of getting like ill must be so much higher because of the amount of germs they're taking on from other people. Yeah, so it makes loads. Just to give you that again, it's a tiny potential edge, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess if you can minimize illness during competition, then of course that's going to make a big difference.
Absolutely.
And like one of the things I read about that in particular was that people wash their hands, but they very rarely like wash the bits between their hands. So there's a an area where you can change things by getting them to understand that. But in order to implement this approach, it had to be done at a full-on organizational level. So everybody has to buy into it in order to do it. Otherwise, you're not going to make the differences. So it has to come from like, not just a top down, but like a holistic approach.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think one of the things I was thinking about with regards to specifically doing it relating to British cycling is, I don't know what the background in terms of when the funding changes, but obviously there was a funding emphasis placed on British cycling, and I think that aligned to finding a good way to utilise those funds, which is what a lot of this stuff is. So, in terms of like, if you have a lot of resources, you can spend resources going, right, we need someone to do a detailed study on, so for example, they redesigned the team bus so that it was better for recuperation. So things like that. So that's fine if you've got the resources to do it. If you don't have any money, or if you're short of money, you're not going to go, well, we're going to spend X hundreds of thousands or millions of pounds, changing the layout of a team bus. It's not a makeover program. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but if you've got resources, then you open up this world of opportunities to examine all this stuff in a lot of detail. And I think that's the sort of things that they were able to do. And like you say, you had obviously like the buy-in to do it kind of top to bottom in the organisation as well. So you can get everything aligned. And we'll come on to this later, but this is one of the reasons why this kind of approach is such a difficult fit for boxing. Yeah,
it does have its critics. I read an interesting interview with everybody's favourite recipient of a Jiffy bag, Sir Bradley Wiggins.
Yeah, I read this as well. So go on, do it. This is hilarious.
It's really funny, right? It's really funny when he starts talking about like. Dave Brailsford, and he says that Dave Brailsford's used it constantly as his calling card, but he always thought it was a load of rubbish. He carries on. It's a bit like the whole chimp thing, referring to the chimp paradox. At the end of the day, chimp theories and marginal gains and all these buzzwords, a lot of the time, I just think you've got to get the fundamentals right. Get on your bike, put the work in, and you're either good or you're not good. Like, there's a point to that. I understand what he's saying. He says like, he goes, that's what makes you a better athlete, your physical ability and whether you've trained or not whether or not you've slept on certain pillows or a mattress.
I think he's emphasising the point that it's like it's so tiny as if to be probably hard to actually determine whether there's any impact whatsoever. But if you take his argument to the nth degree, then it's things like, well, why didn't you ride when you rode the Tour de France? Why didn't you do it in like jeans and a sweater?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
exactly.
Why did you wear bicycle shoes? Why didn't you wear football boots? Why did you wear like a funny streamlined helmet? Why didn't you wear like a baseball cap or whatever? Do you know what I mean? So because if you take his argument, he's saying there's no room for any kind of incremental benefit of anything other than the fitness and the genetics, and that's it. Do you know what I mean? He's saying that everything else has no impact whatsoever, which is kind of like a bit retarded in our argument, I think.
I know what you mean.
It's a massive,
like,
I think it's a simplification. You know?
Exactly. Like, I think it was a bit reductionist, and I think he kind of, within that, he misses the point, right? Because, of course, like, having your own mattress alone is not going to make the difference. And yes, you have to put in training, but it's like, what can you do within that training to make you slightly better? How can you make, like with cycling in particular, as road cycling, there's a lot of, like, support elements that you need to get right. So, like, you know, your maintenance. How can you make sure your maintenance crew have got everything that they need so that your bike works the best way? Have you got all the tires you would need and all that kind of shit? Have they posted the right drugs, you know, in a jiffy bag across, you know, from England, you know, things like that.
Have they definitely made sure they're marked correctly, incorrectly? Have you got your cover story in place? These are all the important details you have to have done.
Exactly.
I remember reading this relatively extensive article, and it was about Froome when he had the day. Was it in the Tour? Was it the Tour de France? Was it one of the other ones? I can't remember. He had this epic day where he did this like enormous catch up to like retake the lead or close the gap. He was miles behind, and he did this epic day where he made up a kind of unfathomably large amount of time. And they said the way they'd done some of the detailed, and it was to do with like the planning of his carbohydrate loading and stuff, and his like water loading, and they set the timings of them with absolutely no margin of error. But basically, it was things like, so he had literally no weight. Was it something like he didn't have a water bottle on his bike, which he normally would have, because they worked out that taking it off would give him X number of weight or everything. But it was all this kind of like super detailed, like minute by minute account of how his day would go based on his, like, what do you call it? What's it, like, kind of kinetic energy, or his sort of power ratios or whatever, you know, and it was planned to the sort of to the minute to the second sort of stuff. But of course, if you can do that and it's accurate, then and other teams aren't doing it in quite that level of detail, that's a source of competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Which is what they used. So I read this other article on sports science. It's got a website called sportscientists.com, and it was basically saying that Brailsford and his right-hand man, who I think was Syed? I think his name was Syed. Basically, they popularised this concept, but they shouldn't be considered to be like the inventors of it. This idea about looking at every aspect, every input that has a bearing on athletic performance is as old as time. Do you know what I mean? Really. And it was just, you know, maybe they looked at things, some slightly quirkier things, and they had this kind of like bucket full of resource to be able to do it in a level of detail that previously hadn't been done. But anyway, the guy who wrote this article on sportscientist.com was saying he was around loads of different sports. He was involved in different ones way before the British cycling stuff. And he said every one of those sports was doing it before I ever arrived. He was one who was to try and implement sort of sports scientific methods. Every one of the sports was doing it before I ever arrived, and will keep doing it once I'm gone. What separates a good from a mediocre coach is the ability to see both the detail and the big picture simultaneously, to not get lost in a few pictures of a giant pixel. The same is true of good science, and that and people leadership. And he's saying that basically all the concepts that you talk about in marginal science are incorporated within the field of sports science, and that's basically it. So this concept of marginal gains is already been incorporated. It's like a long-standing thing. Yeah. I
mean, I think that actually, like, it's basically just a catchphrase now. You know, so it's something that has been implemented for a long time across probably a number of sports. But now, you know, they've stuck this term, and it's just it just sticks, and everybody wants to throw it in, so you know they can say that they're also going for marginal gains. I did read about some implementation that Team GB Boxing have undertaken for the Rio Olympics, and this is all out of like the guys from Sheffield Hallam.
Yeah, the boxing sides
guys. Yeah. So initially for them, their focus was on improving sleep quality, and it's quite interesting. So they replaced all their single beds with double beds, right? Mm-hmm. Along with like switching the sheets, duvets, and pillows to breathable, quick drying fabrics. So the small changes it resulted in the boxers on average sleeping 24 minutes longer each night, which over the course of an Olympic cycle adds up to as much as 29 or 30 days extra sleep.
And the impact of that is?
More resting, better recovery. Because if you think as well, like the amount of trauma your body goes through during a camp, end to end, recovery is like one of the biggest things, especially if you're having to if you're walking around at a weight that's a lot higher than your fight weight, then you need to then make your fight weight. So you're gonna have to be like tearing your body to shreds a little bit, and so recovery is massively important. And within it, like the idea of marginal gains within their sports science is now actually written within the GB boxing strategy for the next 5 years.
It's really interesting, and I'm sure you were the same. But when you start doing like Google search terms around the ideas about like marginal gains, like performance analysis, sports science, all relating to boxing, the results are pretty thin on the ground. These guys, I think, certainly within the UK, are they seem to be like the sort of chief, if not sole, like proponents of this, like boxing science, like this sort of scientific analysis based approach to it. So I read a bit on their website, and it was saying that when they were looking in 2012, that they looked to say, well, what is the existing research on sports science and boxing, to then what are the to look at then evidence-based approaches to take, and they said it was like very, very thin on the ground, and that's as recently as 2012. And I don't know if there's been a huge amount. I mean, I know they've probably been involved in stuff since then, but in terms of like globally, the volume of evidence-based results to then inform practice techniques, I think it's pretty scant.
Absolutely. And, I mean, they look after a lot of Dave Coldwell's fighters. And incidentally, that guy, Anthony Fowler, is one of the guys they look after. You obviously like videos of him doing stuff for camps and things, and they build out like specific training plans for these guys. Like they check their VO2 max levels. They have them running in like altitude tents, like all sorts of stuff to make sure that there's cardio fit. And one thing that they implement as well, right, is strength and conditioning work. So like weighted work. So they've analyzed the science of the punch and what makes what they need to do in order to replicate punches and make the punching harder and more effective. And so they do like velocity based training, so they can improve the snap in punches so that they make them more concussive. I mean, like, but this is all shit that like it makes sense. It makes tons of fucking sense. Of course, but how many boxers are actually implementing this sort of stuff? And
I think it's very few, certainly on the basis of what you hear about. We've sort of like joked about it before. About the old school, chopping wood and stuff like that, which is maybe there are particular, as part of a training regime, that kind of approach, whatever the things that chopping wood does are exactly right. But you would want to be doing like a very detailed like kind of breakdown of what are the goals for X number of days or week, and then what are the absolute like best ways to achieve those goals, and it would be like a whole raft of potential activities that would be best fit, and it has to all be like analysed case by case. So you can't just be like, oh, every day I'm going to go out and like chop wood and run for 5 miles. It's like, well, it needs to be much more scientific than that, because surely, the ones that are doing it with the science behind them are going to have, I'd have thought, pretty substantial advantage over the ones that aren't.
Oh, absolutely. And, they look at things as well, like, nutrition, and how to recover from weigh-ins. So, like, how do you best rehydrate and refuel without upsetting your stomach or spiking insulin, eating too much sugar so you then end up being tired? Like, all of those kind of things as well, which will make a massive difference. Because if you're about to go into a 12-round fight, the last thing you want is a jippy belly,
Like dropping the bombs and the clinches.
Oh, exactly, man. Like, overexerting yourself and shitting yourself while in the ring is probably not the fucking way forward.
But it's amazing though when you think about. I've heard like Tyson Fury talk about how his training regime, in the pattern, it's about having like a feel for what might be the best thing for him to do, and that might work in terms of he doesn't get bored of it. But in terms of that being the absolute most efficient way, there's just no chance. There's no chance that he's going to randomly stumble across the same answers that like a really highly detailed like analytical breakdown of his like all his different metrics would produce, and he's like, he's just going, I felt like doing this, so I did it. I'm like, there's no way that's optimal. It can't be.
And like, it's little things like, okay, you might go out and chop wood, okay, but like you don't necessarily know what the density of each block of wood is, so you don't know whether or not like each time you're increasing or decreasing the amount of force. Like, there's no progressive overload for it either.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. It's a sort of, because it's too random. It's like you don't know. Yeah, you've got no control over the activity. Yeah, I agree. When you think about how far off it is in boxing, it's a good example, obviously, because it's coming up. Not this weekend, but next weekend. But like Chris Eubank Jr., this is the first time in his career that he's decided that there's any benefit to having a trainer. Yeah. For someone to be like, at a world class level and be like, for whatever we say about him, because of the whatever strength and depth within his weight division, but he is, he's one of the best, top 10 or probably at least, and he's not at a trainer. You think, surely a trainer can give you, a good trainer where you have a good relationship could give you a very significant performance boost. And the idea that he's not felt it necessary, it's just, it's like a football team not having a manager, just being like, we're fine, we'll just work it out.
But
like, and for that not to make any
it didn't do well for Rangers for the past like 4 or 5 years.
All right. Quite think that's necessary or valid, but anyway, whatever. But that's how far away they are. Apparently, in terms of the use of analytics and more detailed data and looking at things much more in keeping with other sports, MMA is way ahead of boxing. Really? Apparently so. I don't know an awful lot about it, but apparently they're much more embracing of kind of analytics.
Well, the use of data in sport is something that's incredibly like growing, and the Six Nations is on at the moment, so you can easily look out for it. But you'll notice there's almost like on the guys like where their kind of like trap is, like on their neck, you'll always see like a little square, and it's actually like a tracker. So what it does, it tracks like runs and speed and all this kind of stuff, and like they're analyzing that data all the time. So when they notice that a player's like starting to fatigue, they can substitute them.
Yeah. I'm sure, I don't know if they do, but there's no reason why you couldn't do the same thing in like football as well. Yeah. I was reading about something similar, and it was basically someone saying that like there's no reason why you couldn't have, especially within training, not necessarily you probably have to develop to get it in actual fights, but in training you could have various different sensors.
Yeah.
And that wearable technology could actually give you like a whole raft of feedback. You could look at what happens when they get punched and the combinations they're doing and how their like speed varies based on how far into it. So you could have sensors everywhere, and you could get this like massive raft of really like rich data to then do all sorts of analysis on. And as far as I'm aware, it's not done in boxing, but there's no reason why it couldn't be. You could have all like the kind of body sensors to give you all that feedback.
I think that actually, if it's implemented properly, like this could be a game changer for boxers that implement like a holistic approach to their training.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about, where the reason why I think this is done less in boxing, is to do obviously with the structure. So you have in other sports either like private organizations, i.e. clubs, or almost like kind of quasi-governmental overseers, a la Olympic teams or whatever. So, but say like for the clubs, then you've got like an organization, a whole structure where you've got everyone as an interest in gaining whatever you can, and it's that like kind of building upon like knowledge and investing in all this analysis that gets you further and further along the line to where you're getting these the tiny gains are all that's left because you're doing so much detailed work. Whereas boxing, because it's like an individual and it's not within a structure of an organization, it's impossible, or it's very, very unlikely to adopt this kind of like big organization, big data usage approach, because it's just one person and it's about them to appoint people. They've got to be thinking in these kind of terms and go, how do I make myself an organizational structure that can then be in place to do this stuff? Imagine a boxer going, well, the first person I'm going to hire as part of my team is like a data analyst tech nerd, and then I'm going to find loads of data to give him so he can tell me how to box. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's just, it's a stretch, isn't it? But that's kind of, you need to make it front and center, I think. But I think it's going to be difficult for them to do it. And you think about how slow really sports like, football, I guess, in the UK, and then some of the American sports, they were slow to take this up, to use the kind of the big data stuff. They were like really slow adopters. But boxing, and that was big organizations with a lot of stake in it, and this bit as opposed to like an individual, but they're even slower still. But I think structurally that's one of the reasons why it makes a big deal. Yeah. Do you remember ages ago I was like, why don't you get like heat maps for boxing? Yeah. I read this article on LinkedIn actually, and it was a guy saying how in the NBA apparently they use high-tech cameras to track player and ball movements up to 25 times per second, and the data is collected and processed to paint a picture of player, team performance, etc. Actually, like in sort of as the game is progressing. But there's no reason why you couldn't do exactly the same approach in boxing, and you could have like high-tech cameras that would then like be able to pick up the individual movements, etc., and the like punch output more. So it's not like someone pressing a keypad to try and do it. You could actually, in theory, like get it kind of almost like semi-automated or automated to have it much more like accurate.
I mean, yeah, it makes sense. Like.
Yeah, you mentioned a few episodes ago about Intelligent Boxer?
Yes, you? I did. Yeah,
the kind of collective who want to bring more detailed kind of boxing analysis.
Yeah, like.
But I know they're obviously looking at their focus is on looking at the kind of in fight analysis and saying what are the like looking in detail to get like good outputs from that to use for the purposes of like training, etc. Because I was looking at what is the analysis that's like done in boxing, what's the performance analysis that's done in boxing just now, and you've obviously got like CompuBox, which is everyone's kind of, a lot of people kind of really hate on CompuBox because that is literally like there's one person for each fighter and they're recording their like punch output and which ones land. But Intelligent Boxer, they do the analysis of a fight like retrospectively.
I remember speaking about it now actually, because remember they did a really good infographic ahead of the Usyk Bellew fight, about how like Bellew's like punch outputs went and stuff.
So what I found interesting about that, they try and do a more detailed breakdown in terms of punch types, etc., than CompuBox do as well. Remember, CompuBox is done kind of like in real time, if you like. But so say for I don't know whether it was the first or the second one, but for the Canelo Triple G fight, the punch output for Triple G, how CompuBox recorded it, and then how Intelligent Boxer recorded it retrospectively, there was a 20% difference, 136 punches difference in terms of how many total punches they thought Golovkin threw. And I was like, how can that possibly be? Like, I would assume that the Intelligent Boxer would be about right because they can watch it back in super slow-mo as many times as they want. How can CompuBox be 20% out with recording the number of punches? That's like staggeringly inaccurate, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it really is. Super inaccurate.
So CompuBox is maybe like a bit of bullshit, but it just goes to show that there are some people, I guess, trying to work on looking at things in a bit more detail. But definitely, the consensus is boxing has a long way to go, and the earliest full-on adopters of this kind of stuff are going to reap some substantial benefits from it. So get your motion sensors on for trading, lads.
Cool, perfect. Well, let's move on to what the F are the results from last week.
I got one completely wrong.
Did you?
No, I got it completely right. Me and the bookies, Gervonta Davis retained the WBO super featherweight title in rude fashion, stopping Hugo Ruiz in the first round.
Yeah,
he's a bit of a monster, is he? Dude?
He is indeed. Like, but the thing that annoyed me about this, right, and I'm gonna say this right now, is why is it as soon as anybody beats another person, they're like, "Are you gonna fight Manny Pacquiao next?" Do you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck? Honestly, that's the thing. Like, when's he fighting Pacquiao? Why is he fighting fucking Pacquiao? Let him do his own shit. Do you know what I mean? Fuck.
It's funny, isn't it? Pacquiao is like fighting at there's a fairly substantial weight difference in terms of their fighting weights just now. If Davis is making super feather, your boy, the hot prospect Ryan Garcia. Was slagging him off afterwards. He said Davis telegraphs his shots, and when they meet each other down the line, he will beat him. Well,
do you know what? Like, I think that boy Garcia, like, he is dangerous, man. I think that would be a hell of a matchup.
Yeah, I think it would be. Do you know if Davis, I'm sure, can go up the weights because he's massive for the weights. Down the line, he could fight Loma.
Yeah, he could do. That would be interesting, actually. You know, depends on how you carry your weight up, I suppose.
He's certainly banging power for the weight, so I don't know how much he would go up, but I mean, yeah, it's only so yeah, they're only one division apart, 5 pounds, and they said like Lomachenko went up, yeah, because he talked about who is it, Pedraza, yeah, so Davis was chiming on about the fact that he stopped Pedraza in 7, whereas Lomachenko, when he fought Pedraza at lightweight, he only won by unanimous decision. So he's saying, well, I stopped him quicker, therefore I carry more power, etc. So I think maybe it'll be a fight that happens.
Yeah, the one thing we've got to remember is it's almost like it's quite a reduced Lomachenko, because I think in that fight he still wasn't 100% right.
Oh. You're venturing into the realms of the fan there, I think, right?
Maybe.
The excuse making, no, it's fine. I'm with you, buddy. Right, what else do we have to talk about? Alberto Machado versus Andrew Cancio for the WBA regular super featherweight belt. We did flag this before. The interesting thing was Cancio was a 15-1 underdog, and he stopped Machado in the 4th round after being knocked down in the 1st. This was a really, really good fight. And the most fascinating thing about this, right, is that Cancio is not a full-time boxer.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think that. Like,
how can you be a world champion? I mean, talk about marginal gains. Quit your job and train all the time,
exactly.
which is fine. He works for the Southern California Gas Company, and he said something along the lines of, "I'll go in and all my co-workers can have photos with me in the belt because they're a really good covering for me while I went off for my world title fight." I mean, what the fuck?
I know, it's weird, eh?
It's weird. WBC Super Bantamweight title, Ray Vargas retained versus Franklin Manzanilla, won by a wide margin but was knocked down in round 2, so had to recover from that. Interesting for a division obviously we pay close attention to, Ryan, the super lightweights or junior welterweight, whatever you prefer. Obviously the one of the World Boxing Super Series tournament divisions. Jose Ramirez retained his belt versus Jose Zepeda with a rather unconvincing majority decision after rallying in the second half of the fight. So apparently he deserved to win, but I haven't watched it back, I will admit. But Ramirez won, but he's obviously someone that's kind of like lying in wait for the winner of the World Boxing Super Series.
Just did it. Unified.
And I think that's about your lot for fight results.
Well, then, let's move on to what the F are the fights this weekend.
We really are a bit scraping the barrel, I'm afraid. Friday night on Showtime, not on in the UK, Rob Brandt versus undefeated challenger Kasan Baisangurov for the WBA regular middleweight title. Brandt won this unexpectedly. He won the title versus, was it Murata? Some time ago. And WBA featherweight championship on the line. Leo Santa Cruz versus Rafael Rivera, and Santa Cruz is expected to win fairly comfortably. And I think, without going into the undercards of those fights, I think that's your whack. I think it's pretty slender pickings globally this weekend. So, guys, take a weekend off. Take a weekend off,
because it'll pick up next weekend.
It'll pick up next weekend and for the foreseeable future. So, yeah. Have a chill pill, guys. Have a chill.
Right. Well, let's move on to everybody's favourite bit. What the F went wrong last week?
There's only one proper thing that went wrong, and this was not really my fault. I said, because it was reported, that Canelo was vacating his regular super middleweight belt that he won by beating the overmatched Rocky Fielding. So it's funny. So he's allowed to keep his WBA super, inverted commas, middleweight belt, and also his WBA regular super middleweight belt, if you're following me.
Right, okay.
So he gets to keep both. He gets to keep his middleweight and his super middleweight WBA belts, is what I'm saying. WBA, I've decided that it's fine, so he can sit on them as long as he wants.
Of course.
Bella.
Of course.
Of course, if I can. They should force him to fight Callum Smith.
Yeah.
After he fights Jacobs.
I would love to see that fight. I would fucking love to see that fight.
I think Canelo will get beat. I think it's too much size. Because Ryan, why? Because Callum Smith
is just so big for the weight.
Oh man. You should put that on one of the t-shirts.
I will do.
Let's do that. Let's do a t-shirt.
I'm big for the weight.
No, like Callum Smith is so big for the weight. He's just so big for the weight.
So big for the weight.
Do you know who's so big for the weight? And then in the back, Callum Smith! Exclamation. Listeners, guys, if anyone's got some t-shirt suggestions for us, some t-shirt slogans, if you give us a suggestion and we'll put it on a t-shirt and it sells, then we will give you a very small percentage of the sales, because we only get a very small percentage of the sales. So we are cutting the cake into crumbs, but we will do
totally.
It for any good suggestions.
Definitely.
The other one I had was, we spoke last week about your favourite British prospect, Lawrence Okolie.
Fucking hell, man.
And how he looks so like awkward and gangly. And I don't know if it was that we got it wrong, but we certainly weren't very sure about how he is versus the cruiserweight limit, because he comes in looking so lanky.
Yes, he does.
So he weighed in at 14 stone 3 pounds 8 ounces. So he weighed in half a pound for his last fight. He weighed in half a pound under the cruiserweight limit. So assuming he didn't look like he was dying at it, I didn't think. But I'm assuming he will put back on a bit, but maybe not that much. I don't know. He didn't look like, I don't know. He didn't look totally gone and drained to make the weight, is my point. But I think he's certainly not, like sitting within the weight band. He's at the top of it, assuming a bit of rehydration to get him back over.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty light week on the what went wrong. Right?
Wow. There we go. We're improving 1% every week.
We're at episode 32, I think, this week. So by that stretch, we're at 33% good.
Well, I could imagine we are 33% better than episode 1.
Potentially. I think we are, just on the basis of the sound quality. I think maybe not the chat, just the sound quality. And I think we've settled on our format, have we?
We have, yeah.
Are we polished now? Do you think we're polished?
Getting polished. We're getting polished.
I'm not getting polished. I wish I was getting polished. Oh dear. Anyway, should we do some
Let's
random
do
news?
some random news.
18th of May in Glasgow. Who's going to be there?
You and fucking me.
Yeah, we await the official confirmation, but of course it's going to happen. So in terms of the fight that has been confirmed, it's on. So Taylor's fighting Baranchik, and amazingly, doubleheader, Inoue is fighting Rodriguez on the same card. So amazing,
I cannot believe
Got
that,
to
man.
go.
I just cannot believe that.
So I thought they would have. I thought commercially it would have made more sense to have that headline somewhere different. Inoue's a big star in Japan. I don't know. Anyway. Super grateful.
So, guys, if we are going and anybody is going to that particular boxing match, let us fucking know.
That's a good point. Yeah, please do.
Let us know.
Please do. Go for beers.
Yeah, we'll go for beers, because I think it'll actually be the last one we were at. The production was actually very good, and the hydro was pretty decent actually.
It's very fun. Yeah, it'll be a real great evening. I wonder what else they'll add to the undercard, but it's going to be a big one.
I'd say so.
It's going to be fun. Random news: Fury Wilder hasn't been confirmed. The purse bid deadline, the date for purse bids, I should say, was as we were recording today, and of course it's the end of the day now, and it's not been confirmed, even though this was the deadline for their extension. But they've been given a few more days to finalise the details. A fight that has been confirmed for the 1st of June, Ryan. You were talking about it last week.
Sake. Joshua Miller, I just cannot believe. I understand commercially it makes sense, right? But I don't know. I just think that it's just a pile of shit. It really doesn't get me off, honestly.
But I think it will be a big disappointment. Oh, I know what I meant to say. I do have another bit of what the F went wrong. I totally forgot to mention it.
What's that?
I think listening back to the episode last week, I kind of made it out if you're in the UK, you wouldn't pay for Joshua Miller, which I'm sure, of course, you will. So it'll be on the free. They included in the package in the States for DAZN, but I'm 100% sure it'll be pay-per-view in the UK, even though it'll be in the middle of the night. It'll still be a pay-per-view.
Yeah, which I think is silly. I think if anything, just as a thank you to people, I think they should have it as a regular Sky card, because it's gonna be on DAZN.
I'd be curious to see how many people will pay for it. I mean, maybe it depends. I mean, I was reading an article because it was only today that it was confirmed that it was happening, and it was saying a lot of casual fans in the UK will not know who Jarrell Miller is, and I'm like. Yeah, I was like, if that's, I mean, to be honest, it's hard once you're so involved in it, Ryan, like we are, it's
ingrained.
Once you're ingrained, once you're in the loop, it's hard to know what it's like for casual, people that have a passing interest in boxing. Would they know who he is? maybe they wouldn't. And in which case, he might come across as an interesting opponent because he is so massive and he will talk some pretty good smack in the build-up. But we know well enough that barring something exceptional happening, he's going to be a punch bag for however long he lasts before he gets dropped in his arse. And he has a very, very limited prospect of winning this match.
Yeah.
Because he can't punch and he can't move.
Nope.
And he gets tired. And he weighs 500 pounds. Fucking hell, it's not sumo wrestling. Anyway, sorry, so that was a bit of what the F went wrong.
I've got a little bit of random news actually as well. And this is proper random.
Go on.
So, you know how Dave Allen and Lucas Browne are fighting on April 20th?
Yeah, well, I didn't know the date, but yeah, I knew they were fighting.
So, like, Dave Allen has been proper bamming up Lucas Browne. And Lucas Browne, on his Instagram last week, shared, like, a naked photo of himself with just, like, covering up his dick, right?
What, like, you like a loincloth?
No, like, he, like, basically, like, redacted it. It's the only way to describe it, right? And then, like, Dave Allen, like, responded with a similar naked photograph, but he, like, made the redacted bit much bigger to make it look like he had a bigger knob. It's really, I think, like, I don't know, like, how that's gonna go, like, that fight, but I think I'm looking forward to it. I think it will be a good fight, like, but I mean, like, I'm pretty sure Lucas Browne has been back on something because he is looking like pretty svelte in comparison.
Is he looking pretty
to what he was when he fought White?
Is he?
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting. Neither of them. Do they? I mean, I guess they'll have drugs testing regimes, even though it's not. Neither of them are ranked, are they? I wouldn't. Well, I don't know if Browne still is, but I wouldn't. They're none of them in like top 15 in any of the governing bodies. But I assume they're still like. Alan would still be covered by UCAD.
Yeah,
still have
I mean,
and I guess
Lucas Browne is ranked by the WBC. He's 25, so he won't be tested in the clean boxing program.
Right, okay.
Just throwing that out there.
Top. Interesting. I wonder if they're going to manage to generate some like animosity towards each other for, you know, the press conferences and stuff in the build-up. Neither of them really seem like, I don't know, if they're sending like dick pictures to each other or redacted dick pictures, what are they going to do? Like,
don't know.
Are they going to like ramp up the innuendo? I don't know. It's all a bit. It'd be good crack.
Hey.
But I don't know. I think the fight might be like interesting, but kind of like a car crash.
Yeah, I agree. It's like who gets more tired first.
We're like bloody sort of sweaty, like hugging messes, but it might be fun. WBC voluntary mandatory interim new number one contender pretender. Would you like to talk about this a little bit for the WBC heavyweight positioning? Because I know it's something.
I'll properly come on to it later, but like, yeah, I mean, Dominic Breazeale and Dillian Whyte are going to have a fight for the position of mandatory, but. Like, what... And I will come on to this a little bit more later, but it kind of makes no fucking sense. Because actually, there's going to be other people that are going to want to fight the winner of the belt before these two fuckers will get a crack at it. So... Yeah. It's just like, who wants to be number two? You know what I mean? That's it. Like, it's... Yeah. It is what it fucking is. And it doesn't make any sense either because, like, Dillian Whyte is ranked 2 by the WBC and Tyson Fury is ranked 3. So you would think it would be a fight between 2 and 3.
Yeah, I know. Anyway, I was going to come on to that as well, so it might be that we end up doing, without giving the game away, it might be that we end up doing a combined Grinds My Gears, which is interesting because, and this is true, obviously we don't actually discuss that before the recording of the episode, what we're going to do. It's a surprise for each of us.
It is a surprise.
And it seems like we're at least overlapping. I had one more bit of random news, quite big. I think this has just been announced today. Clarissa Shields versus Christina Hammer, April 13th, New Jersey, for all of the middleweight marbles.
Wow.
Now, Hammer, along obviously with Hammer, along obviously with Shields, are both top, like highly ranked pound for pound in women's boxing. So I think this is probably the potentially paradigm shifting women's boxing match that's been. I guess there was only a couple that could have got made that would have the same kind of resonance, and I think this might be one of them. This might shift the goalposts. And that's it. No more random news.
Yeah.
No more redacted penises.
No more redacted penises. Right. Well, Andy, do you want to tell me what grinds your gears this week?
You know what really grinds my gears?
I will do, and I feel like, I've kind of mentioned it already, and also you're going to probably say the similar thing, so it was very charitable of you to let me go first. I think what I wanted to say was actually to do with the WBC and how they're running their organisation. So
I totally fucking agree with you.
Was that yours as well, or was yours more specific?
Well, no, mine is more specific to the heavyweight division in the WBC.
Yeah, well, mine's kind of that as well. so it's to do with how they basically, and I think it's Maurizio Suleiman is the head, isn't he? And he just kind of like seems to the problem. I think fundamentally is that they are both like they're judge, jury, executioner. They make the rules and then decide on their implementation. Mm-hmm. So that they can do whatever the fuck they want, and there's no kind of issue with that, it seems. So the whole thing about there's the whole thing about Brazil white. Brazil's the mandatory, and then it's like, well, actually, this has been going on for ages. There's going to be all this time before Fury and Wilder fit again. So do you know what? Actually, you've got to have another fight to maintain your position. So it's kind of like they keep changing the rules. I'm not saying White deserved to be in that position, but it seems odd for him to have been in the position, for him to not have had his opportunity, and then for him to have another fight just to keep the division kind of ticking over in their rankings, despite the fact that it's kind of like in contrary to what they said before. And the same token about lapsing the deadline for saying there will be purse bids on Feb 13th, But actually, seeing as you're quite close, Fury and Wilder, to agreeing your terms, you can have some more days. Oh, and don't worry, everyone, because I'll personally be monitoring the situation. What does that mean?
Yeah.
You personally be looking at, you're getting a wee bit of encouragement to let it kind of go on a bit longer. What if, for example, someone had spent, like DAZN apparently were going to bid for it. What if they'd spent a whole bunch of money, like preparing everything, to be able to submit all the research and all the information to prepare to submit a purse bid for the 13th for it to then be pulled. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can't. There's not a way to organise yourselves just because it's like if you'd set the date and you'd told them you won't get an extension, then they would have met the date.
Yeah.
But because they know you're like flip floppy about it, then they're taking the piss out of you. It's like make rules and then have them adhered to properly. Fucking hell. It's a joke.
It is a fucking joke. It's a complete fucking joke.
So that was for me. Was yours along those kind of lines, or was it something else as well? Or
well, what really fucks me off about the WBC, right, is like they have pretty much completely ruined the point of having a sanctioning body. Okay. They have done whatever the fuck they can to keep Deontay Wilder the heavyweight champion of the WBC, right? He's not had to fight fucking mandatories. He's gone for voluntary defenses with people who are the lowest ranked they possibly can do, right? And like, this. I understand why they have the various belts, right? It's a money-making situation, all right? But, like, the mandatory challenger thing is, the eliminators are to find out, okay, well, who is, ranked number one to fight the champion, okay? Now, within their own fucking rankings, now Wilder's the champion. Dillian Whyte is ranked number one. He's got the silver belt. He's been there for fuck knows how long, right? Tyson Fury is number two. Luis Ortiz is number three, and Dominic Brazil is number four. So what I don't understand is why are they not calling a fight between Dillian Whyte and Luis Ortiz? Because we know that Tyson Fury is already fighting the champion. So. And this is all a pointless fucking exercise because if Tyson Fury wins, then there's a rematch, which is going to be, so it's going to be a trilogy. So it's completely fucking pointless. I just don't understand it. I mean, and like this is why people get fucked off with boxing. This is why,
It's funny because you feel like kind of Brazil's been a bit shafted, but then how did he get to be mandatory? Like, I don't understand. He's not beaten top ranked guys. He's not beaten really anyone. I'm trying to think who he has beaten. But,
the last guy he fought was Carlos Negron, right? He beat him.
Who did he beat before him?
Eric Molina.
Oh, Eric Molina. And then the one before that was, is it Ugo someone?
Ugona. Izugbe Ugona.
I don't think that's how you pronounce his name, dude. Although I didn't do a much better job, in fairness.
Well, it doesn't come in phonetics on fucking BoxRec, I'm afraid. Right?
Anyway, that was a really good fight, actually. That's a really good fight. Izu Ugona. But anyway, he's not beaten anyone that puts him. He should not be mandatory. He's not beaten any top level guys.
No.
So like, I don't know how he got. He got there unfairly, and then he got it taken away from him unfairly.
Yes. So anyway, it's just bullshit, and I'm done with it. And like, I don't. I'm just done. I'm just done. I'm out. I'm done. I'm over. WBC, you've lost my respect. Okay, I'm gone.
Good one.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, man. But this is why people hate boxing. It's like us, like the final of the Champions League isn't exciting enough, so we say, oh no, we're just gonna put someone else in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You be like Barcelona. Or Real Madrid. You've had it too many times, so we're gonna put someone else.
Yeah, exactly.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
it is ridiculous. It's utterly ridiculous. So I think we were kind of overlapping there, but I think it re-emphasizes how ludicrous it is that we both independently chose it to talk about.
It does, actually. It really does. Cool. So let's just do like a little quick bit of listener corner. Now, last week, okay, we did a little shout out because we got a review on the Facebook page. However, because of the way Apple works and they're kind of douchebags, we didn't realize that Tony King had also written us a review on fucking iTunes as well. Round of applause. This, guys, is what we need from you. This is what we need.
Doubling down on the reviews, guys. This is a great example. Thank you very much.
Exactly. So, let that be an example to you. Also, we got to give another little shout out to William Anderson. He had a fight last weekend. It didn't go the way he wanted it to, but at least he stepped in the ring, and I think he's looking for the rematch. So well done, William Anderson, for stepping in the ring. Good job.
Good effort,
man. Good effort. Yeah, but other than that, I think that's everything for this week. So it's goodbye from me, Ryan.
And goodbye from me, Andrew.